I'm proud to be the president for the workers, not the outsourcers, the president who stands up for Main Street, not Wall Street, who protects the middle class, not the political class, and who defends America. My job is I have to defend the American dream, and I have to defend the American citizens. That's my job. I have to defend that.
President Trump speaking at last month's NRCC dinner, promising to defend the American worker and improve the economy. My next guest has a new Time op-ed where she makes the case for the working class, writing decades of neoliberalism have produced communities in despair, disconnected from prosperity and too often ignored by our most powerful institutions. A complementary set of pro-growth, pro-worker policies is essential. Joining me now is the E.L. Rothschild CEO, Lynn Forrester de Rothschild. Lynn, it's great to see you.
Great to see you.
Thank you so much for being here. So you agree with President Trump?
Well, I think we have learned, listen to what Donald Trump says. He does what he says. And it's thrilling to be with you today when the market has caught up with the fact that what Donald Trump is doing in trying to help the working class is going to be fine for the market.
Yeah.
And when Scott Bessent says Wall Street has done fine, now we have to care about Main Street. So the question is, how much more, for me, the question is, how much more can President Trump do for the working class? And in the Harvard Business Review and yesterday in Time, I wrote 3 things. One is, we right now tax working people when they start making $20,000 a year. And the poverty level in this country is 32,000. Donald Trump could wipe away taxes for people up to 32,000. Just say, we're not going to tax you at all, keep your money. And the advantage for the government would be that earned income tax credits and all the things that we have to do to give the money back to people, which we have to continue to do, would go away. But it would encourage work.
Yeah.
It would reward work.
Rather than being dependent on the government for handouts.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of revolutionary, but Donald Trump is so bold, he's so strong, that I think he is actually the person who can do it.
So what do you think the role of government should be in all of this? Because, you know, we're having this debate every day, and the fact is that it's expensive. And they're trying to get the agenda across the finish line, the big, beautiful bill, and you've got to pay for those no tax on tips and no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security. Now, your element that you're talking about in terms of, you know, not taxing the 20,000 crowd and going up to the poverty level is one idea, but how do you pay for it?
Well, I like what Donald Trump said when he said, I'm willing to give up a little bit more, so that more people can enjoy the benefits of what they earn.
So take that millionaire's tax up.
Yeah, I have no problem with that, myself. And I think that there are so many benefits that the rich have. Depreciating the cost of a private plane, carried interest. The rich have many, many benefits. And I think that President Trump is a person who can say, look, we've done just fine, and let's do better for the workers. And by the way, the evidence is that companies that take better care of their workers are better stock performers. Paul Tudor Jones, who you know, and Dan Schulman from PayPal have a just 100 index that people can invest in. And they look at companies based on how employees are compensated, what the benefits are, what the rewards are for upward mobility. And that index has way outperformed the Russell and the S&P.
How do you like that? You know, I didn't know about that Just
100 index.
And the Just 100 index, it's 100 companies that are treating their workers best, or how do they come up with those 100 companies?
So what Paul and Dan did was they've created a staff that does deep dives into company policies on how workers are treated. And in that deep dive, they rank the companies, and they create a list of the 100 top. And that list has outperformed the Russell by about 45% and the S&P by a lot. And there's another person, Dan Early at Duke, who created what's called the HAPI, H-A-P-I ETF. And he is a social scientist, and he's done the same thing. He's been double the S&P in that small index.
Wow.
So treating your workers right does not mean that shareholders suffer. And I think Donald Trump gets that. So we don't have to just have government, giving away tax benefits.
Yeah.
We can have companies that do the right thing.
And when President Trump joined me back in March, I said, what do you want to see at the end of this 4-year term? And he said, I want to see private enterprise running things as opposed to government running things. Now, you wrote in the Harvard Business Review back in January those 3 policies that you're talking about. How do those policies lead to growth? Let's talk about growth, because that is the president's priority. And again, when I say, how do you pay for all this stuff? He says, don't forget about growth.
Right.
Growth is really critical.
Right. And there's very interesting and important work done on that topic. So when we had in this country lower inequality, which was, say, from 1945 till 1980, we had faster rates of growth than we've had from 1980 till now, when our inequality has been much higher. So the academic studies do say that if we can reduce inequality, spread the wealth, our growth will be greater. And I believe Donald Trump gets that.
Yeah.
And remember, Donald Trump in 2024 won 56% of the working class vote.
Yeah.
Of every color, white, everything.
So what happened to the Democrat
And that
Party?
was up from 50% in 24.
What happened to the Democrat Party, who, claims to be for the working people, but the policies don't reflect that?
Well, I think that's a really interesting phenomenon. It's like when AOC said, what, you voted for me and you voted for Donald Trump? Explain that to me. And I think that if Donald Trump is the one who produces for the working men and women of America, the Democratic Party is in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
And that really, really is problematic. But I think, so of his victory, he won 4 million more working class voters in 2024 than he did in 2020. And he won the popular vote by 2.3 million. So those working men and women made him president and gave him Congress. So he's not going to forget about them.
Yeah.
And I believe he is going to do the right thing. Time will tell, and it's going to be fascinating. But I don't think Wall Street should freak out about this, is my real point, why I love talking to you.
Yeah. Well, he is doing it. He's on the ground in the Middle East right now, just landed in Qatar. Had a very successful trip to Saudi Arabia, and now has turned his attention to the Qataris and will then head to the United Arab Emirates. And he's talking about foreign policy right now, but certainly he's doing, peace deals, tax deals, and trade deals. So Wall Street seems to be figuring it out. Lynn, it's great to have you this morning.
Oh, I love being with you.
Thank you so much. Lynn Forrester de Rothschild here.